Hello and welcome to Indus News. Live from Islamabad, I'm Naila Shuja and these are the headlines. In occupied Jammu and Kashmir, Indian troops have martyred another Kashmiri and wounded dozens after they opened fire on peaceful protesters in the Shopian district. They were protesting against the martyrdom of a student, Jahangir Ahmed Vani, in a fake encounter on Sunday. The troops also burned down several houses and used pellet guns against the residents. Internet services remain suspended in the area to prevent atrocities from being reported. In Myanmar, 6 more protesters have been killed after security forces opened fire on pro-democracy demonstrators. The protesters took to the streets a day after 39 people were killed on the deadliest day since the first February coup. Meanwhile, the ruling military has imposed martial law in 4 more districts of Yangon. The United States, Qatar and the Taliban have discussed the Doha Agreement and the ongoing Afghan peace process. U.S. envoy Zalmay Khalilzad met Qatar's foreign minister and the leader of the Taliban, Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar, in Doha. It comes a day after the Taliban said they were reviewing Washington's proposal for an interim government in Afghanistan. In Australia, tens of thousands of people have taken to the streets protesting against the sexual abuse and harassment of women. They were spurred by a recent wave of allegations of sexual assault centered around Australia's parliament. They say the government's response to the allegations has been inadequate. Indonesia and the Netherlands have become the latest countries that have suspended the use of AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccine. Several European and Asian countries have suspended the use of the vaccine over blood clot fears. Globally, the virus has infected close to 120 million people and claimed over 2.65 million lives, including 13,537 in Pakistan. At the Dubai Tennis Championship, resurgent Japanese star Kai Nishikori fought from a set down to beat big serving American Riley Opelka 3-6, 6-3, 6-4. Meanwhile, Joe Wilfried Tsonga's injuries woes continue as the Frenchman was forced to retire from his opening round match against Malik Jaziri. For more news and details, stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back. In occupied Jammu and Kashmir, Indian troops have martyred another Kashmiri and wounded dozens after they opened fire on peaceful protesters in the Shopian district. They were protesting against the martyrdom of a student, Jahangir Ahmed Vani, in a fake encounter on Sunday. The troops also burned down several houses and used pellet guns against the residents. A 22-year-old man lost his sight after being hit with a pellet gun. Internet services remain suspended in the area to prevent atrocities from being reported. The killing of innocent Kashmiris in fake encounters has been going on for the last many months. 3 innocent Kashmiris were martyred by Indian troops last year in July, while another 3 lost their lives in a fake encounter in December. The bodies of the martyred were never handed over to their families, but India has failed to snatch the Kashmiri spirit of independence despite the ongoing atrocities. In India, farmers have camped along Delhi borders for 110 days now, despite more than 250 deaths. They have ruled out suspension of their movement until the centre's contentious laws are reappealed. Canadian YouTuber Lily Singh used the global stage of the Grammy Awards to highlight the agitation. She arrived on the red carpet wearing a black mask that read, "I stand with farmers." Earlier, the governor of the Indian state of Telangana, Satyapal Malik, said that one of their three laws in favor of the farmers. Speaking in Uttar Pradesh, the governor urged the Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Home Minister Amit Shah not to use force against the farmers. The United States, Qatar, and the Taliban have discussed the Doha Agreement and the ongoing Afghan peace process. U.S. envoy Zalmay Khalilzad met Qatar's foreign minister and Taliban leader Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar in Doha. Taliban spokesperson said the head of the Taliban negotiations team, Sheikh Maulvi Abdul Hakim Haqqani, also attended the meeting. Dr. Naim said the implementation of the current situation of Afghanistan was also discussed during the meeting. It comes a day after the Taliban said they were reviewing Washington's proposal for an interim government in Afghanistan. Pakistan and Iran have stressed on the need to promote regional cooperation to help establish peace in Afghanistan. This was discussed during Pakistan's envoy for Afghanistan, Mohammad Sadiq's meeting with Iran's Foreign Minister Javad Zarif in Tehran. The two sides also reviewed the latest developments, including the process of peace talks in Afghanistan. Zarif said Iran backs peace in Afghanistan and achievements gained by Afghan people must be preserved. Sadiq elaborated Pakistan's stand on the latest developments in Afghanistan. Earlier in a meeting with Deputy Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, both sides voiced concerns regarding the rise of ISIS in Afghanistan. Pakistan's ambassador to Iran, Rahim Hayat Qureshi, said the two sides agreed on the necessity of joint efforts for peace and stability of the region. Iran's Foreign Minister Javad Zarif says time is running out for the United States to revive the 2015 nuclear deal. Speaking at the European Policy Center, Zarif said Washington will need to make up its mind before the upcoming Iranian presidential elections in June. He said the election will be followed by a waiting period for almost 6 months. The Iranian foreign minister added the Biden administration is following the footsteps of former President Donald Trump. In Myanmar, 6 more protesters have been killed after security forces opened fire on pro-democracy demonstrators. The protesters took to the streets a day after 39 people were killed on the deadliest day since the first February coup. The ruling military has imposed martial law in 4 more districts of Yangon. Meanwhile, Chinese factories in the Haling Thaya were looted and destroyed by unidentified assailants. The Chinese embassy described the situation to be very severe, saying Chinese staff were injured and trapped in the attacks. The embassy asked for security to be guaranteed quickly and also warned Chinese citizens in Myanmar. Elsewhere, Japan says it is monitoring Myanmar's coup and is considering how to respond to it. The United States says it plans to revive diplomatic efforts to end the war in Yemen. Secretary of State Antony Blinken was speaking to the United Nations Special Envoy for Yemen, Martin Griffiths, over the phone. The State Department says Blinken told Griffiths that the United States supports a unified, stable Yemen, free from foreign influence. He asserted that there is no military solution to the conflict. Meanwhile, the Arab coalition says it has destroyed a Houthi drone fired towards the southern Saudi city of Khamis Mashayed. This comes as the Yemeni forces and the rebels continue battling over the oil-rich Marib governorate. Syrians marked the 10th anniversary of the start of an uprising against Bashar al-Assad's government that turned into a civil war. The conflict has killed around 500,000 people and displaced half of Syria's pre-war population of 23 million. The United Nations says more than 80% of Syrians now live in poverty and 60% are at the risk of hunger. U.S. sanctions have also deepened the country's economic woes. But President Bashar al-Assad remains in power despite a decade of fighting and a broken country. The Netherlands has joined the list of countries that have suspended the use of AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccine. Meanwhile, the vaccine continues to ravage Brazil. The virus has claimed more than 1,100 lives and infected nearly 44,000 people over the past 24 hours. Globally, there are more than 2.65 million deaths and close to 120 million cases. As skepticism surrounding COVID-19 vaccination grows, stronger new waves triggered by potent new mutants of the virus continue to spread. While the United States preps to implement its mammoth $1.9 trillion coronavirus relief package, the disease is claiming 1,500 lives on average every day. The situation in Latin America is even dire still, where the virus is battering lives and livelihoods equally hard. Despite reporting the highest daily deaths in the region for nearly 3 weeks now, Brazilians continue to reject restrictions.
Today I'm protesting against Governor João Agripino Doria's dictatorial attitudes. He wants to impose a lockdown on the population, put an end to employment, health, and to put an end to the people of Sao Paulo.
In Europe, too, patience seems to be running out. Police had to intervene to break up anti-lockdown protesters in Netherlands. Italy's Piedmont region has also stopped the use of the Oxford vaccine, adding doubt to the inoculation campaigns across the world. France is once again faced with a decision whether to implement a lockdown or not, as new cases shoot above 26,000. Over in India, new cases are rising again, while poor governance and management have created a food inflation crisis.
The production in some areas, as it is the logistics of getting the food where people want to use to buy the food. That has been a big problem. In some other areas, the pandemic and the restrictions caused by the pandemic has affected access to essential items.
Meanwhile, Japan is considering limiting spectators at the delayed Tokyo 2020 Summer Olympics to half capacity because of the coronavirus risks. Pakistan has recorded another 29 deaths from COVID-19 and nearly 2,200 cases overnight. The health ministry says more than 13,000 people have died since the pandemic began. Officials say Pakistan's caseload has crossed 607,000, out of which more than 571,000 people have recovered, while the number of active cases has surged past 22,000. Planning Minister Asad Umar said vaccination registration for people aged 50 or above will begin in 10 days. Umar said the third wave is more lethal and the $150 million allocated for the vaccine procurement can be increased if required. Pakistan has joined the Organization of Islamic Cooperation in observing the first ever International Day to Combat Islamophobia. Islamabad presented the resolution to observe the day at the OIC's Council of Foreign Ministers last year. In a statement, the Foreign Office said the OIC's unanimous support for the designation of this day is a reflection of the sentiments of Muslims around the world. The OIC group will hold a high-level event in New York on the 17th of March to mark the occasion. The OIC is now working with the international community to commemorate the day at a global level. New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Arden says the world still needs to have conversations about racism and white supremacy. She said this while addressing a news conference on the second anniversary of the Christchurch terror attack. Arden said it was incumbent on New Zealand to get its house in order after the attack. She added the country's Muslim community is experiencing some pretty horrific racism ever before. She urged the global leaders to fulfill their responsibility for the culmination of hate speech and extremism.
But I would say that actually globally, there are no boundaries really anymore when it comes to, really hateful speech and language. Every leader needs to take into account that their voice can be broadcast anywhere, at any time. Countries need to take that into account. So I think it's for all of us to reflect on what we've seen with those violent extremist attacks since that time.
It's now time for a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. In Sweden, a fire has erupted at a private school for Muslim children in Örebro City. No casualties were reported in the incident. Speaking to state media, the school's principal said footage from security cameras shows two people setting fire to the school. Hussein Al-Daoudi said the masked men broke the windows of the lower floor and threw flammable materials inside. Police have launched an investigation into the incident. In Australia, thousands have taken to the streets across the country, protesting against the sexual abuse and harassment of women. They were spurred by a recent wave of allegations of sexual abuse centered on Australia's parliament. The allegations have focused scrutiny on the Conservative government. The protests were organized a week ago after Attorney General Christian Porter revealed he was the subject of a rape allegation in 1988, which he denies. Separately, an ex-political advisor who alleged in February that she was raped in a minister's office in 2019 also fueled public anger. Protesters feel the government's response to the sexual assault allegations has been inadequate. At least a dozen villagers have been killed in an overnight raid in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. Civil rights groups say men armed with knives and other weapons attacked the village of Bulonglo. They blame the ISIS-linked Allied Democratic Forces, which has been active in eastern Congo since the 1990s. Civil society groups fear the death toll could rise since the militants operated for several hours. Earlier, the United States designated the ADF as a foreign terrorist organization, accusing it of having links to ISIS. Congo's eastern borderlands are home to over 100 different militias, many of which are remnants of the country's civil wars that ended in 2003. Britain's Cabinet Office will set up a second flagship headquarters in Glasgow as the government plans to move some of its operations to Scotland. The decision came at a time when support for Scottish independence is running high. The Foreign Office plans to create 500 new jobs at an existing office in the East Kilbride. In a statement, Cabinet Office Minister Michael Gove said that this will bring new jobs and investment to Scotland and strengthen the diversity of the United Kingdom civil service, ending the Westminster knows best approach into policy making. Polls show more people in Scotland support independence than want to remain part of Britain. The Dutch are voting in a general election seen as a referendum on the government's handling of COVID-19. Roughly 13 million voters are eligible to vote over the next 3 days to choose representatives for the 150-seat House. Pre-poll surveys show Prime Minister Mark Rutte's Conservative VVD party set for a comprehensive victory and fourth successive term. The closest contender is Geert Wilders' Freedom Party, known for its Islamophobic and xenophobic views. With a ban on public gatherings, the election campaign instead focused on a series of televised debates. Major parties, including Labour and the Green Left and pro-education Democrats 66, are vying with the centre-right Christian Democrats for third place. 6 people, including 5 herdsmen and a child, have died after a heavy dust storm hit Mongolia. The country's emergency management department says rescuers are trying to locate 81 missing people. Neighboring China has also been affected by the dust storm. The capital city of Beijing is shuttered in thick brown dust, limiting visibility and disrupting traffic. China's meteorological agency has issued a yellow alert, calling it the biggest sandstorm in a decade. Flights have been grounded and the air quality has reached the serious pollution level of 6. A giant wooden tower has torched as part of the Malynitsya Folk Festival in Russia's western Kaluga region. This year, the structure, especially built for burning, was named the Vaccination Tower, denoting the COVID-19 pandemic.
Millions of Russians celebrate Maslenitsa, or Pancake Week, to mark the end of winter. Maslenitsa week began as a pagan ritual and has been absorbed into the Russian Orthodox Church. The beginning of spring, which was seen as the start of New Year in pagan times, made some festival visitors want to reflect on 2020. Artist Nikolai Poliski said he was inspired to create the 24-meter structure as a hopeful goodbye to the pandemic. Festival visitor Anjan Nia says they are welcoming spring. They burn everything bad and hope for the best, happiness and good health. Another visitor, Art Yom, calls the festival a success and said the organizers were able to put up something unusual.
In Nepal, hundreds of climbers are set to return to Mount Everest under strict conditions. The world's tallest peak will be reopening next month after a year's closure amid the pandemic. More in this report.
As the peak climbing season nears, the Sherpas of Nepal prepare to guide aspiring foreign mountaineers to summit the Everest. In April 2019, a record 381 climbers attempted to scale the 8,849-meter mountain.
Our Sherpa climbers are ready, but there are safety issues as they have not received vaccines. Also, some of the climbing staff have gone to the base camp to start preparations.
8 of the world's 14 highest mountains, including Everest, are wholly or partly in Nepal, and foreign climbers contribute millions of dollars in income annually to the cash-strapped nation. Expedition organizers say the Chinese side of Everest, which was shut to foreign climbers last year, will stay closed this season as well, likely meaning that more climbers will be on Nepal's side.
More than 300 foreign climbers have been confirmed to climb Mount Everest. We expect this number to rise as there is still some time left.
Nepal closed its mountains in March last year as part of tight measures against the coronavirus, which has infected over 270,000 people and claimed more than 3,000 lives so far.
Nothing is more painful than a parent's grief of losing their child. A Syrian farmer who did not just lose one, but all 13 of his sons, as well as his wife, has found solace with his grandchildren. More in this report.
Tears leave his eyes as Abdul Razak Al Khatoon looks at a video of the execution of one of his sons. Like many other victims of the Syrian civil war, Khatoon's story is also full of tragedy and grief. In 2011, when protests began against Bashar al-Assad, he and his sons participated as well. However, the demonstrations quickly became violent, and 3 of his sons were killed during the first year. His other sons also died later as the conflict worsened. Afterwards, Khatoon also lost his wife when a rocket hit their home in Hama.
After I went out following the revolution, I lost 3 children, and afterwards I started moving from one village to another until I reached Sarakib. I lost 7 before and another 7 at the gas station, so 13 children, and my wife, Umeyman.
Khatoon, who was once a leading farmer with 1,800 acres of land, has now become penniless. He lives in a tent with his 12 grandchildren and the wives of his dead sons. Even after facing so many tragedies, the 84-year-old still thanks God and is hopeful for better days.
Now I took a piece of land and planted olives. I live with Harbanush inside a tent to look after 12 grandchildren.
Millions more, like Khatoon, have fled their homes for safer areas within Syria or as refugees abroad. His story is an accurate depiction of how the common people have suffered from the rivalry of great powers.
At the star-studded Grammy Awards, Taylor Swift and Billie Eilish won big, while Beyoncé has set a new record with her 28th Gramophone trophy. More in this report.
It was a historic, triumphant night for women in music at the 2021 Grammys. Taylor Swift became the first woman to win the Album of the Year 3 times.
And the Grammy goes to Folklore, Taylor Swift! I want to thank
I want to thank all of my collaborators who are on the stage. I want to thank Serban Gania. I want to thank Justin Vernon.
The writers of I Can't Breathe by R&B artist, her one song of the year. It was written in response to the Black Lives Matter protest that rocked the US last summer. Black culture was also celebrated in Beyoncé's single, Black Parade, which was named the best R&B performance. Billie Eilish's ballad, Everything I Wanted, won the Record of the Year. And the 19-year-old also won for her theme song for the upcoming James Bond movie, No Time to Die, hosted by Trevor Noah. The ceremony was packed with pre-recorded and live performances by Taylor Swift, Post Malone, The Baby, Black Pumas, and Mickey Guyton. Swift went full Woodland Fairy for her mystical, moss-covered medley of 3 folklore and evermore tracks. K-pop band BTS performed their hit English-language single Dynamite at the close of the show.
European stocks have edged up as global investors focused on this week's upcoming Federal Reserve meeting. Italy's FTSE MIB is leading the gains, ascending over 1%. The Pan-European Stock 600 added more than 0.5%. London's FTSE and the CAC 40 in Paris also gained close to 0.5%, while Frankfurt's DAX edged up marginally. Earlier, Asian stocks traded mixed with Australian, Japanese stocks edging up, while Chinese stocks, Hong Kong and Hang Seng, along with Seoul's Kospi, shed. It's now time to take a look at the weather around the world. For the latest news updates, you can follow us on our social media at Indus.News.